Angie Dickinson names 7 most damned actors. Angeline Brown was born on September 30th, 1931 in Calm, North Dakota. She went by the name Angie Dickinson. She is one of the most famous and beloved actors in Hollywood. A woman whose beauty, talent, and drive made her make a name for herself in the entertainment world over many decades. She grew up in a simple home as the second of Frederica and Leo Henry Brown's 3 girls. Her parents ran a newspaper and were the publisher and editor. She moved to Burbank, California with her family when she was a child in search of better chances. This move changed Angie's life because it put her right in the middle of the height of the American showbiz business. Even though she grew up with traditional values and the rules of a small town, her natural charm, cleverness, and self-confidence showed that she would have a great future. Angie Dickinson didn't plan to become a star at first before she became famous for her acting. She went to Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles and got a business degree. Then she got a job as a secretary. But fate stepped in when she competed in and won a local beauty pageant, the Miss America qualifier for Burbank. This event not only made her famous, but it also presented her to people in the entertainment business who thought she was beautiful and poised at the same time. Soon after, in the 1950s, she started getting small parts on TV, which caught the attention of directors who liked how she looked on screen. Early roles on westerns and anthology plays like Death Valley Days and The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp quickly showed that she could be both dramatic and attractive. Howard Hawks directed the famous western Rio Bravo in 1959, which was her big break. She was in it with John Wayne and Dean Martin. Dickinson made an unforgettable impact on both audiences and critics with her performance as Feathers, a strong-willed and witty saloon girl. She held her own against 2 of Hollywood's biggest male stars. Her show wasn't just about how pretty she was. There wasn't a lot of independent, brave, and smart actresses in westerns at the time that had such complex parts. Her part in Rio Bravo made her a star and showed that she was a versatile actress who could command the screen in both action-packed and emotional roles. As the 1960s and 1970s went on, Angie Dickinson built one of the best Hollywood records. She was in a lot of different types of movies, from crime stories like Point Blank in 1967 and The Killers in 1964, to romantic comedies and dramas. Some of the biggest stars of the time, like Frank Sinatra, Burt Lancaster, and Lee Marvin, loved to work with her because she was naturally beautiful and sure of herself. She was known for having a polished charm that was both strong and feminine. This made her stand out from many other women of her time. Off-screen, she became close friends with Hollywood's elite, especially the Rat Pack, and became a part of the glamorous, fast-paced world they lived in. Dickinson did something in 1974 that would become the most important thing in her career. Detective Sergeant Suzanne Pepper Anderson on the groundbreaking NBC show Policewoman. Dickinson broke new ground for women in TV by being one of the first female police detectives to be featured in a primetime drama. The show did well with both critics and viewers. It ran for 4 seasons and won Dickinson the Golden Globe Award in 1975 for Best Actress in a Television Drama. Her role as Pepper Anderson not only showed off her acting skills, but it also became a symbol of women's power during a time when feminist movements were changing American society. Many female police officers later said that Dickinson's role made them want to become police officers. Angie Dickinson kept working regularly in film and TV after she stopped being a police officer. She did a great job of adapting to the changing entertainment scene. In movies like Dressed to Kill 1980, directed by Brian De Palma, she played a sexually complicated and risky character that showed she was still willing to break the rules, even as her career went on. In the 1980s and 1990s, she continued to be versatile by appearing in miniseries, dramas, and as a guest star. These parts showed how popular she was and how dedicated she was to her job. In 2001, she had a nostalgic appearance in Ocean's 11, a remake of the 1960 classic Oceans, in which she co-starred with her old friends Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Fans loved her link to the golden age of Hollywood. Many people have been interested in Angie Dickinson's love life for a long time, both because she was beautiful and famous, and because the men she dated were important and skilled. Her marriages were like 2 very different stages in her life. The first one happened when she was young and full of desire. The second one happened when she was famous and emotionally complicated. She married Gene Dickinson for the first time in 1952. Gene was a businessman and former college football player who gave Angie a sense of safety when she was having trouble starting her career in Hollywood. Angie was still getting used to being a young actor and was working her way up through small TV roles and movie supporting roles when she got married. And even though they were married for 8 years, Angie's growing fame and the fast-paced world of show business often put their relationship to the test. People said that Gene encouraged her to reach her goals. Still, the gaps between their lives. He worked in business, she became more famous in show business, kept them apart. Still, Angie got her official last name Dickinson from this marriage. She chose to keep this name even after they got divorced in 1960. It quickly became a sign of her identity as one of the most beautiful and sure of herself actors in Hollywood. After 5 years, in 1965, Angie Dickinson got married in what would become one of Hollywood's most talked about unions. Her marriage to Burt Bacharach, a famous composer, singer, and music giant. Their relationship was beautiful, artistic, and very emotional, but it was also very complicated. At the height of his fame, Bacharach wrote classic hits for singers like Dionne Warwick, Dusty Springfield, and Tom Jones. By that time, Angie was a well-known actor who had been in hit movies like Rio Bravo and Ocean's 11. She was known for being smart and hot. They quickly became known as one of Hollywood's golden couples, and people praised how sophisticated and successful they were as artists. But behind the glamorous and romantic public picture of their marriage, there were times when they felt alone, when their work was in conflict, and when they had a personal tragedy. In 1966, their daughter Leah Nikki Bacharach was born before she was due. Nikki, who had long-term health problems and later was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, became the emotional center of their marriage. Angie often talked about how her daughter was both her greatest joy and worst struggle. Based on Burt's job, which took him all over the world, Angie had to take on a lot of the parenting duties. In later conversations, she told Candor about how her feelings for Burt slowly grew colder over time, even though they still loved each other. After 16 years of marriage, they finally split up in 1981. It was very hard on both of them. Angie Dickinson still talked about Burt Bacharach with a lot of respect and love even after they got divorced. She once said that he was a singing genius like no one else, even though she knew it was hard to live with someone so smart. Bacharach often said nice things about Angie's grace and intelligence, which made it sound like their relationship had a lot of effect on each other, even though it didn't work out in the end. They both carried a heavy heartache when their daughter Nikki died in 2007. Angie rarely talked about it in public, except to say how much she loved her child. Angie Dickinson had a long and interesting career. She worked with some of Hollywood's most famous people and saw genius, ego, heartbreak, and amazing human behavior. Dickinson has never been afraid to be honest about the people she shared the screen with because she is known for being honest and having sharp intelligence. In a rare unguarded chat, she talked about what she called the 7 most damned actors. She didn't use that phrase to be mean. She did it because she was interested in the actors whose immense talent was often matched by personal demons, bad tempers, or tragic contradictions. She once thought that Hollywood was never a place for saints. There, pretty devils wore charm like perfume. Marlon Brando was the first name she gave. She called him a man of genius and destruction all in one. Dickinson thought he was the best actor of all of them. She did admit, though, that Brando was cursed by how smart he was. He could never be at peace with himself. When he was at the height of his fame, she worked next to him and saw a guy who was loved and hated by everyone. She said in a soft voice, he wanted the truth in a business built on lies. That was his tragedy. Dickinson saw Brando as the perfect example of a paradox, an artist whose sensitivity made him great but also broke him inside. She said that another famous person, Steve McQueen, was doomed by the desire for power. Angie really liked the rough beauty of McQueen. Still, she couldn't ignore the fire that burned inside him to hurt himself. Steve was always on the run, from the studios, from love, and from himself. She talked about how he could be both hot and cold at the same time. He told them that he was incredibly cool on the outside, but inside he was a wandering spirit that never trusted happiness. He was beautiful to look at, she said, but he couldn't escape his sadness. She then talked about Burt Reynolds, a close friend and regular co-star who she loved but also fucked. She said Burt was damned by pride. He wanted to be loved but he couldn't admit it. Dickinson recalled him as a man who laughed and strutted around while hiding how weak he was. He was the type of person who could make a room laugh, but when everyone left, he was the only one left alone. Even though he had a lot of hits, she said that Hollywood's cruel desire for youth and ego cast a shadow over his career. She put Montgomery Clift at the top of her list. Dickinson had never worked with Clift directly, but she admired him. He was one of the most beautiful men I ever saw on screen, she noted. But his spirit was fighting with itself. A lot of people had told Angie stories about Clift's kindness and pain, his intelligence and his pain. The world's inability to accept who he really was damned him, she said with thought. People in Hollywood who are too sensitive are sent to that kind of hell. She also talked about Richard Burton, and said that love had damned him. She said that his relationship with Elizabeth Taylor was one of the most romantic and sad in movie history. She said that Richard could read Shakespeare like it was his own breath. But he loved a storm named Elizabeth with all his heart. With love, they burned each other to death. Dickinson respected their skill but felt sorry for their pain. He was damned not because he was bad, she thought, but because he was hooked on love. James Dean was her sixth choice, and she said that he was damned by youth. Angie never met Dean, but even after he died years ago, she could still feel his force all over Hollywood, she said. He was the ghost that never left. He was everything that young artists hoped to be and feared they would become. She respected his skill and charm, but she also saw in his short life a scary warning about the allure of fame. She said with longing, "He died quickly, but his shadow lived on forever." The last person Dickinson named was Robert Mitchum. She said this man was damned by his resistance. They worked together early in her career, and she would never forget how much he believed in her, or how much he didn't respect Hollywood's rules. Bob didn't care what the studio wanted, she said with a laugh. He played by his own rules and that scared people. Dickinson said that Mitchum was a rebellious man with honor who would not be tamed. He wasn't damned by weakness, she made it clear. He was damned because he refused to bow. After writing down the 7, Dickinson sat still for a moment and then said, "I don't mean damned as an insult. I say it because it's true. Even though these men were great, they were doomed to fail because they were too human in a business that doesn't tolerate it." She saw each of these stars as a representation of the good and bad sides of old Hollywood, the fame and the fall. She finally said, "Those were the brightest stars. Very bright stars always go out too soon." Angie Dickinson didn't judge them in her own elegant way. She treated them well. Her words weren't about scandal, they were about understanding. Only a woman who lived through the golden age of movies could have that kind of knowledge. "I guess we were all damned in a way," she said with a sad smile. "But that's what made us real."